Good morning. Today we have Dr. Alon Ben Meir. He is a retired professor of international affairs. Most recently, he has been teaching at the New York University, and at the same time, Dr. Meir is a globally acclaimed expert on Middle East and West Balkan affairs. So Dr. Meir, welcome to our interview.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Just let's begin with this. Recently, you have written an article where you have mentioned that Joe Biden is the best friend of Israel. So, we know that Joe Biden has declared recently that he is not going to invite Netanyahu to Washington. So, in this case, why do you say that Joe Biden is the best friend of Israel?
Well, you have to really look at his political history going back more than 4 decades. He's been extremely consistent in supporting Israel. So this is nothing new for us. And since he became president, and of course, while he was also vice president, he has shown time and again his support to the country, his admiration for Israel, and for his commitment to Israel national security. So his record speaks for itself.
In this case, actually, as you know, that recently President Biden he held an international summit which is called this Democracy Summit for Democracy, something like this. But we have seen that a country like Pakistan, it was also invited in this Democracy Summit. We are having doubt about Pakistan being a democratic nation, and President Biden didn't invite many of the democratic countries to his summit, including Bangladesh. So, is it really a democracy, or is it kind of the Biden's own definition of democracy?
I think you are absolutely right there. It's a very important question. That is, were all the 120 attendees to this conference or all democratic nations? For example, if you look at Hungary, you look at Poland, or even Israel for that matter. I think that they are in name democracy to some extent. There are elections. There's some human rights are being observed, but in nature they are dictatorial. So certainly many countries been skipped. But to say that all the countries at present were democratic, that would be a mistake. And to suggest that every country that was not necessarily invited is a dictatorship. So there's a mix. But the judgment, I think it was based on two important principles. One, there are free and fair elections, presumably in these countries, which is very important. And the other thing is that the concept that these countries have the potential of being fully democratic nations. So this was sort of the criteria, but I think to some extent, there's a certain level of being somewhat arbitrary.
Yeah. Dr. Meir, you are aware that for South Asia and many other countries in the world, jihadism is a big problem. And in Bangladesh, if you are aware that we have a government from 2009 under the leadership of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, which has been vigorously fighting jihadism and religious extremism. And Bangladesh has not only prospered in economically, but Sheikh Hasina has tremendously, effectively, very successfully combated jihadism and violent extremism. But unfortunately, the Biden administration in the recent years, it is seen that it is somehow showing the signs of inclinations towards the radical Islamic groups in Bangladesh, including Jamaat Islamic. This is number one point. And the second point is, you will agree, Dr. Meir, that for effectively combating terrorism and jihadism, We need a very effective law enforcement agency anywhere in the world. Even you have in the US, FBI and other agencies. But in Bangladesh, the main agency, the Rapid Action Battalion, which has been fighting effectively against jihadism and terrorism, it has unfortunately become a target of the Biden administration. So, I mean, can we say that Joe Biden is actually in favor of jihadism, and he is, in other words, trying to patronize the elements of jihadism, and he is trying to patronize the jihadist and pro-Islamist forces to come to power in countries like Bangladesh?
I think to suggest that he would support or in favor of any jihadism anywhere, for that matter, will be a mistake. That is, the United States has been waging what is called a war on terrorism and on extremist groups around the world. But I want to emphasize something. It is far from being a perfect campaign, so to speak. That is, the jihadism is, extremism is popping up throughout the world, including Bangladesh, even in Israel, even in some part of Europe, certainly in the Arab world, throughout Africa, in the Balkans. So they do exist. And this fight is going to be, it's a long, tedious, difficult fight. And I think President Biden is doing what he can. But we have to also remember the limitations. Even the United States has limitations as to how far they can go in the fight against terrorism and jihadism throughout the world. This is, however, it's been the goal of the Obama administration, certainly the goal of this current administration led by President Biden. But I'm the first one to tell you that the campaign is far from being perfect. On top of this, there's no question mistakes can be made. That is in terms of assessment. After all, the administrations rely on assessment being received from the FBI, from the CIA, from there are 13, 14 different kind of intelligence agencies in the United States. And so the administration received that kind of information and by and large act on that information. But to suggest that every piece of information is accurate, it's another stretch. I always think that we as a human being have our own natural frailty. We have shortcomings. And the shortcomings does not exclude even the most sophisticated intelligence agency. But these things happen. But I think the commitment of President Biden and his predecessor, Obama, without any question, was to fight terrorism and jihadism throughout the world. And one other point I do want to mention. Sadly, the United States has interest in various countries where there are dictatorships. You can look at the Arab world. You can look at so many different countries where there is de facto dictatorship, but the United States has to deal with these countries nevertheless. That is unfortunately in the nature of international politics, and national interest matters wherever you go. And so too, that is why, we look at sort of the overall picture. Is the overall picture satisfactory? To some extent, one might say yes, but there is tremendous room for improvement.
Yes, but I fully agree with you. But I mean, for a president of the U.S., I mean, U.S. is known as the land of braves and heroes, and United States is as a great country. I mean, for a great country like U.S. Supporting a rise of Islamism and jihadism in a Muslim-dominated country like Bangladesh. I mean, don't you think it goes against the basic principles, ideologies of the U.S., which it has been holding for decades?
Well, I'm not sure. You making the statement that the United States support jihadism in Bangladesh. I personally, be honest with you, haven't seen any evidence of that. And any evidence in terms of what the United States has in fact done to encourage jihadism in Bangladesh or elsewhere in East Asia.
Yeah, but I will bring the I will give the example, and a very strong example of this, because in Bangladesh, we have a democratically elected government at this moment. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina is the prime minister of the head of the government, and the country is heading to the next general election, which is scheduled to take place sometime end of this year. So, in any election, parties should participate. But this jihadist Jamaat Islami and Bangladesh Nationalist Party, they want the help of the Biden administration and come to power in this country without holding any election, which is actually impossible. But why a Biden administration or the US is supporting those kind of notions where those parties are talking about uh, coming to power, or not accepting the process of coming to power through election. You know what I mean? I mean, they are come to power without election, which is not possible, in fact.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, in the case where the certain group extremists usurp power by force, that is completely unacceptable. So there's no question about it. As far as I know, when it comes to Bangladesh, I did not see specific steps taken by this administration to, in fact, directly support these groups. I mean, I haven't seen. You are from there, and I'm sure you have a better insight into what's taking place. I personally haven't seen. I can only talk to you about the general principle. And like I said, even of course, even the Biden administration can make many mistakes. But I have to personally feel that the Biden administration has been committed to fighting terrorism, to fighting jihadism, wherever they may be. And mind you, even here in the United States, we have many, many extremist groups. Yes, and what happened in January 6th of 2020. I mean, we see these things happening just about everywhere. And so to suggest that as a policy, the Biden administration cannot and will not support these type of extremism as a matter of policy.
Dr. Meir, Professor Meir, well, recently, the former president of the U.S., only yesterday, he was indicted on the allegations. I seek my apology that for having illicit relations with an adult film star and with a lot of sexual scandals. I mean, for a country like U.S., how a man facing so much of sexual scandals and business scandals and financial scandals, how that person even now can aspire to become the president of the US once again. I mean, it would be, if it was the case in Bangladesh, we would never support those kind of people ever in our country.
I could not agree with you more. I think Trump was an aberration, and I hope and pray that this country will never see his likes again in the White House. However, the indictment against him is not merely because he has had an affair with a porn star. When we look at the various felonies, there were 34. He's been accused for committing 34 felonies. That is, it is one thing to give money, hush money to a porn star. It's another, how do you handle that? And so he has done all kind of scheme to cheat the government, to violate election laws, all of it, and so many more in order to cover up so he's been covering up for a lie, and he has to lie again to cover up for the other lies. So, and this president, in fact, I don't even want to call him president, because as far as I'm concerned, he has not earned the title of presidency. He's been impeached twice. No other president in American history has been impeached twice. This person has been impeached twice, and he's the only president now that has been indicted. Moreover, I'm almost certain that he will be indicted at least on 2 other charges. One, his interference in the Georgia election, and the other one for the insurrection January 6th, and potentially, of course, for holding very top secret documents and refusing to surrender them. So he is, I think, born criminal. This is not new. From the time he was a young man, he has committed many white collar crimes. What he's, however, smart is one thing. He manages to get out of this by getting attorneys to do his dirty work, and the tactics of delaying and delaying. And he's been successful. And finally, the law caught up with him. I can only pray that this country will wake up as a result of this and never again elect a president who is fundamentally corrupt.
Yeah, but okay, we understand that Donald Trump may face many indictment in the coming days. But what happened? What about the son of the current president, Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, who is also accused of series of corruptions, even his corruptions in Ukraine, where the current president of the U.S. was directly involved in intervening into the business affairs of his son. I mean, we have all the documentary evidence about that. And then we are hearing that recently that the president of the U.S. is also accused of giving financial benefits to Chinese Communist Party. I mean, in this case, can we say that U.S. on one hand, a person like Donald Trump, who should not become the president of the U.S. ever, on the other hand, President Joe Biden with a family accused to be tremendously corrupt. I mean, and we know about Hunter Biden's the drug addiction and his addiction towards prostitution, etc. I mean, what is happening? What is wrong with the U.S.? U.S. is a country, as I said, land of braves and heroes. Where are those braves and heroes in the U.S. who can come forward and become president, who are not having this kind of dirt in their personal lives?
You know, I agree with you on the last point specifically. As a matter of fact, only a few days ago, I was having a conversation with another scholar, and I said, what a shame that this great country could not produce presidents who are, intelligent, dynamic, capable, skilled, honest, the likes of which, even President Kennedy, he had the charisma, he has the intelligence, but he also has had his own problems just the same. When you talk about, however, about Hunter Biden, first of all, he is not the president, and he will not be the president, period. He has possibly committed some crimes, but he has not been indicted as yet, and he potentially could be indicted. But from my perspective, I do not blame the sin of a child on his father, and I don't blame the sins of the father to the child. So we have to sort of look in even in the Bible, when God wanted to punish the Jews at the time for the sins, and the prophet Ezekiel said to him, but you cannot punish the children because of the sins of their father. And here's the opposite applies. So my feeling is that, yes, there is corruption in just about every single administration. In fact, I don't know a country, to be very honest with you, that you can say this country is totally and completely clean like a whistle. They have absolutely no crimes, no corruption, nothing of the sort. Maybe you can count them on a single hand if they exist altogether. So again, I do not want to provide excuses, neither for the Biden administration, nor for his predecessor, nor for any other president for that matter. However, we need to understand a fact of life. We as a human being, we make mistakes. We commit errors. We should be accounted for. We should be facing justice. And the point here is the United States capable and willing to take these people and force them to face justice. And I think what we saw in this last phenomena with President Trump, he finally, after 50 years almost of consistent corruption, he finally faced justice. And to think in those terms, never happened before in this country. I hope it will not happen again. But the fact is, we have risen to the occasion. And that matters to me quite a bit.
Yeah, Professor, very important thing you said, that there is not a single country in the world which can claim that it is 100% clean. And there is corruption in the US as it is, and everywhere in the world. There is human rights violations in the US as it happens anywhere in the world. There is judicial injustice in the US and everywhere in the world. But still, why the US is always raising finger at a country like Bangladesh, that we are only the countries with the corruptions and human rights violations and no rule of law, where those things are also prevailing in many other countries in the Western world as well.
I absolutely think it's a mistake to point the finger at Bangladesh in particular, but the United States also been pointing the finger at so many other countries, and that's this. After all, what is happening here? All I can suggest to you that there is no deliberate effort to try to catch Bangladesh in particular doing A, B, C, and D, which is a mistake or a crime or corruption. There's no that kind of deliberate effort. But again, if that is happening, if taking place, I personally must admit to you, I'm not aware of the United States actually focusing or doing something in particular against Pakistan. But the United States is pointing the finger at many other countries. But even then, the United States also makes mistakes. There's no question. So I'm not here to defend any administration. As a matter of fact, I'm apolitical. I do not belong to the Democratic Party or the Republican Party or anything. I maintain my independence. Sometimes I criticize a president for action that have taken, and sometimes I praise them for some different action that's worthy of praise. So this is how I look at it. So I'm happy to take your word for it that there is some effort made for this administration to point the finger at Bangladesh. I personally am not aware of that, and I have to admit that to you.
Professor Meir, what is your opinion about this Middle East? Currently we're seeing certain signs that there will be possibly normalization of relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel and many other Arab countries, possibly in the near future, even countries like Bangladesh. How do you see that? The Saudi Arabia normalizing relations with Israel at a time when Saudi Arabia is also normalizing relations with Iran, and Iran is a country which remains a possible major threat to the Jewish state. How do we accommodate the whole thing?
It's interesting you asked me this question. As a matter of fact, only yesterday I wrote an article exactly about that. Let me just begin by saying the following. Saudi Arabia is not going to normalize relations with the state of Israel anytime soon, unless there is a solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict based on a two-state solution. This being the position of the Saudis, and that position has not changed. I have spoken to top Saudi officials very recently, and they reaffirm that under no circumstances will they normalize relation unless there is a solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. However, they do have tacit relationship with Israel. They're cooperating with Israel on intelligence. They're buying from Israel military equipment, technology. They are doing so because it serves their national interest. The second question, how could they possibly normalize relation with Iran and Israel at the same time? This is the new doctrine of the Saudi Arabia. They have three elements they want to protect. They want to increase their influence in the region. They want stability in the region, and they want to continue to export as much oil as they possibly can. These are three fundamental elements that are interconnected and reached by the Saudis. That is very important to keep in mind. So from their perspective, they can sell oil, almost 1/3 of their oil to China, but they still depend on the United States for national security. They want to mend relationship with Iran because of their concern over Iran, but also they want to maintain a relationship with it. That is quite consistent with their effort. They have the money, and money is power. And now they have learned to use that money in order to exert influence throughout the region. And as a matter of fact, Saudi Arabia has become today the de facto leader of the Arab world. You know, it used to be Egypt. Egypt, of course, is extremely important, nevertheless, because still the largest Arab country. But nevertheless, because of Egypt problems, difficulties, financial disaster, Egypt is losing some of its luster, so to speak. But the Saudis now, because of their approach, because of the money they have made that principal decision. I'm calling it the Saudi new doctrine. And this doctrine is that they will pursue their national interests in every which way they can. They are more than happy to deal with, and for example, Iran was enemy of Saudi Arabia as well as with Israel. So from initially a year or 2 or 4 years ago, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. That was their approach to Israel. Well, now they feel they can have rapprochement with Iran without sacrificing their relation with Israel. And final point I want to make is that there is the concern over Iranian nuclear program. And that was a great concern for the Saudis. As the Saudis see it, in which I spoke with them, they said the following. There is no point in not having any dialogue with Iran, when in fact we are concerned what Iran is doing. A dialogue can always advance interests of both parties. And eventually, it is more than likely that they'll be able also to influence Iran to some extent to come back to the negotiating table and negotiate about its nuclear program. So I think the move is a wise move. It is not inconsistent with the Saudi national interest. And I think they have been so far doing so very successful.
The very last question and very brief reply, Professor Meir, because as you just mentioned about the Saudi position of Israel-Palestinian issue. So, I mean, for a really effective formula for resolving the crisis between Israel and the Palestinians, do you suggest or do you recommend this the two-state policy?
I absolutely support 100%. As a matter of fact, I've been supportive of a two-state solution going back to my school, and my PhD was based on the importance of creating a two-state solution going back 40 years. And I have been consistent ever since, never changed my mind. However, what has changed? The new facts are on the ground. New facts that dictate a different kind of solution, but not at the expense of Palestinian independence. I have been advancing major proposal, which I call the creation of confederation between Israel, Palestinian, and Jordan, because they have so many commonalities. For example, landmass is connected, population is interdispersed, national security is interdispersed just the same. Jerusalem, the same thing. So you cannot separate anymore. However, to create confederation of sort, you're going to need independent states to voluntarily collaborate on matters of their interest. That is where I'm going with this. In fact, my proposal is published in just very recently in the World Affairs Journal, the entire proposal, and it's been receiving significant interest because they feel the conditions on the ground have changed. We have to consider that because you cannot reverse everything anymore. But within the context of these realities on the ground, you can still establish an independent Palestinian state as long as it will continue to cooperate on security matters, cooperate on Jerusalem, cooperate on the question of the settlement, Israel cooperate on the question of the refugees. And I think it is doable. And I've now been I made it my business now to push this approach in order to hopefully contribute however little to bring an end to the terrible Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Dr. Professor Alon Meir, it was a great privilege talking to you, and thank you very much for giving us time. And I do honestly believe, and I'd like to request even you, I would like to humbly request you to appear on our interview with in the future also, so that people, our readers particularly, they can learn a lot from you. And we also hope that, as you say, this Israel-Palestinian issue will find a solution through this two-state policy, and there will be peace in this world. And also, we hope that there will be peace in the U.S. and U.S. finally can find a real leader. I mean, a real leader who can lead this great country. Thank you very much, Dr. Alon Ben Meir.
It is my pleasure. Anytime, I'll be more than delighted to appear again on your wonderful show. Your reputation precedes you everywhere. And I'm pleased and honored to have this conversation with you. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much, sir.
Pleasure, my pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye now.